Well, can we just focus on a little bit to Prince Charles today? You've been here all day, an historic day in many regards.
Oh, certainly. This was in visual form, if nothing else, a real transitional moment to some extent, a really stark image there for anyone watching. Prince Charles sitting to the side slightly, and the Queen represented there by the crown, pride of place, and then the further generations, William to the right of the crown as well. This was a moment whereby we were seeing really potentially the beginnings of what a modern monarchy might be looking like, a smaller role for the Queen as she gets into her later years, and a larger role for those further down in the family. But also looking at the sort of pageantry of today, as we normally see those politicians walking two by two from one chamber to the other.
Always good to look at the body language.
Absolutely, and try and work out what on earth they're saying. Because, of course, Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer have been sort of briefing against each other, shall we say. But it's been reported that Boris Johnson has a personal dislike for the Leader of the Opposition, and indeed the Leader of the Opposition has been getting pretty up in the face of the Prime Minister in previous weeks with regard to Partygate. So what on earth were they discussing as they made that short journey from the Commons to the Lords, standing next to one another? It was an interesting moment. They did seem, at the very least, to share a joke after not looking for each other for the first half of that journey. But that's the pageantry of it all, which does matter. The symbolism here does matter.
Let's turn on to the actual legislative agenda. Lots announced today in many regards, but actually what went through it all and what the Prime Minister reflected there, and indeed Keir Starmer, it is the cost of living crisis, frankly, that is the focus of politics at the moment.
It certainly is, and Keir Starmer, in his response to the proposition of the Queen's speech today, mentioning a word that we haven't heard much of in the House of Commons for several decades, stagflation. Really talking about how this government risks becoming a high-tax, low-growth, high-inflation government. That's the charge of the Labour Party. Now, many people may legitimately say, well, Keir Starmer, what would you do to bring down the sky-high inflation that this country is facing? Not just in the UK, of course, but also in the EU and the US as well, all facing what looks like it's approaching double-digit inflation and, of course, slow growth. A real problem that people are only just beginning to feel in their pockets. If people feel that the economic situation is pretty bad now, it's only going to get worse. That is a strong line for the opposition to take. However, the government is really saying that it is doing some things, and there may be more to come. Some hints there from the Prime Minister in his statement that there may be a future announcement in the coming days.
Yeah, he did, and he talked about coming days, but a bit like some announcements of the government, days can turn into weeks, can't they? Just finally on this though, Tom, there is a sense, I think, within the Treasury that what they don't want to do is to make this situation worse. They're not really saying it or being very frank about it, but what they don't want to do is give loads of people more money, in the sense that that could make inflation much worse. But at the same time, there is enormous political pressure for the government to do more. They are going to have to do more, aren't they?
Well, this is the particular political problem that we're facing. Of course, if there's loose monetary policy, that risks turbocharging inflation, sending prices soaring yet higher. The way that you tackle inflation is through economic pain, quite frankly. Now, the Bank of England thinks that this inflation may be transitory, may be coming down as the economy sort of kicks back into gear. A lot of this inflation seems to be coming from the shutdowns that we saw in the Far East, and indeed things revving back up again after 2 years of various lockdowns staggered throughout the world. And yet, really, all the government seems to be doing at the moment with regard to inflation is sitting on its hands and hoping that the Bank of England and the Governor of the Bank of England are correct. However, this is an organisation that didn't see this high inflation coming in the first place, despite some think tanks warning that it may. So really, it's a tricky situation, but you're right, the Treasury very worried about stoking further inflation with loose fiscal and monetary policy going forward. However, the government also keen to say that it's doing things to spur the economy forwards, talking specifically with regard to energy, the council tax rebate and issues like that, but also talking about moving to the future, the 2024 income tax cut, and indeed that rate rise, that threshold rise for national insurance, which helps those who are on the lowest incomes.
And that's coming
more of their
in July, isn't it? Tom, as always, thank you very much indeed.